Hello, welcome to our industry panel discussion, Disrupt and Advance, the firms that are transforming business, with a particular focus on how technology innovation is a driving force for firms to disrupt across sectors. This discussion is brought to you by Ditto, live from our London studio, following on from the success of Enterprise Ireland's recent Digital Disruptors event hosted at Deloitte London. We've gathered together a panel today with a deep experience of disruption and innovation, providing our attendees the opportunity to gain valuable insight. I will share more details at the end of the discussion today on how to find out more and some further reading, along with an upcoming publication we planned. This webinar is being recorded, and there will be time for audience questions, but a little more on this later. So first, let's kick off with some introductions. I am Mike Wilson, CEO and founder of Ditto, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. So some notes on Ditto. Founded in 2008, we are a marketing and business development practice focused on technology, with offices here in London and in Dublin. I'm also the founder of the Right Tech Forum, a not-for-profit industry-wide community and resource dedicated to regulation and technology innovation. I am joined by four leading voices sharing their perspectives today. First of all, Ed Greig, Chief Disruptor at Deloitte. Hello, Greg.
Hello,
Ed.
hello.
Dr. Kevin Freeney, CEO at Chemist.
Hello.
Dr. Lynn, CEO at Edgetier.
Hey there.
And Richard Crook, CEO and founder at Lab 577. So I'm going to give some words of introduction of our panel members, but also kind of upfront. We are extremely cognizant that this is a very white and very male panel. And one of the things that is critical for the success of our industry is diversity and inclusiveness. Now, I know Ed has been, and we all have been champions of that. I know, Richard, previous your role as Global Head of Emerging Tech at RBS, were a key champion of women in tech and diversity in tech. But I know Ed will speak specifically, but we felt it was important to talk about that up front in the session today. I know Ed will touch on it too. So I think let me get some introductions to our panel members underway, and then we'll get our session underway. So Ed was a farmer and butcher before he joined Deloitte in 2009. Since then, he has worked across many industries, with clients ranging from global multinationals to startup social enterprises. He leads a large disruption team, working with new technologies to deliver tangible benefits as quickly as possible to Deloitte and his clients. Hello.
Thank you.
Dr. Kevin's technology industry experience goes all the way back to 1999, when he devised and developed the world's first prepaid mobile phone credit delivery system via credit card networks. Between 2009 and 2018, he was Senior Research Fellow at the School of Computer Science in Trinity College Dublin. Kevin. Dr. Shane is an entrepreneur in Dublin with a background in machine learning research and artificial intelligence. Having previously worked in analytics consultancy, Shane has built teams that analyze customer data for some of Ireland's largest companies. Shane is now co-founder and CEO of Edgetier. Hello, Shane. And then finally completing our panel. Hi, Shane. Just to everyone who's dialed in, the 4 or 5 of us are in the room here in London, and Shane is dialing in from tropical Dublin. So if there's a little bit of lag in the line, apologies to attendees.
The knowledge.
Okay, and finally, Richard. Richard leads a team of engineers and innovators investigating emerging technologies and their application. His current focus is on the application of distributed technology, including blockchain. Richard has a 20-year career in investment banking technology, specializing in the building of financial ledgers and regulatory reporting for the largest financial services institutions. Good morning, John. It's a pleasure to be moderating here today, and thank you for taking part in today's discussion and sharing your insights. Now, I'm just going to go a quick explainer on the format, and then we'll jump straight in. We're also joined by Padraic Geraghty here as well from Enterprise Ireland, and I'll give it a special introduction. I've got a special Padraic section coming up in a moment. So let me explain the outline and how this webinar will work. So to start, I will give a short overview on the topic. Our panelists will then introduce their firms, what they do, and how they are disrupting. A question that then we asked after each presentation. We thought that was a nice way to do it, to mix it up a wee bit. So presentation, question, presentation, question. There will be plenty of time at the end for audience Q&A. So if you are tuned in and have a question to raise, please submit into the question box on the screen. If you're looking at this later on rewind, as we say in Ireland, don't text in now, as your text might be charged, but there will be some contact details at the end of the presentation, and please drop us an email and we'll be delighted to respond. So just before we go, we have a special guest. We'd like to introduce Padraic Geraghty, Senior Market Advisor, Digital Technologies at Enterprise Ireland, and he will be sharing with some further information updates on Enterprise Ireland Digital Disruption Programme events and initiatives later in the presentation. Hello, Padraic.
Hey, Mike.
Okay, so finally then we'll sum up your discussion with one comment for each of the panel members. Okay, so let's dig in, guys. Okay, to set the scene, Welcome, Disrupt and Advance, the firms that are transforming business. A showcase for firms that are using technology to challenge the status quo. This is part of an ongoing series of events. We're inviting firms from early stage to startup to more established businesses to share with us their experience developing their solutions and companies and bringing them to market. So we'll discuss their products, their challenges of adoption, tips and advice on how they're moving their offering from ideas on a whiteboard to successful pitches in the boardrooms of international customers. So our four individuals on the panel today are cracking. We've a great raft of experience here and all at different levels of maturity of their firms. So to kick off with the panel presentations, I would like to ask Ed from Deloitte to share his fantastic story of disruption. And maybe do, Ed, if you just want to frame it to begin with inclusivity and diversity, that would be much appreciated. So over to Ed.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. So the question that I am looking to address here is around what are the barriers to innovation, and that's something that my role as Chief Disruptor for Deloitte, that's something that we are always kind of looking to address. So as you said in the introduction, it's all about how can we get new technology delivering tangible benefits as quickly as possible into our clients, into Deloitte ourselves, and into kind of the wider society. And our mantra, if we go on to the next slide, is to fall in love with the problem, not with the solution. And I think that's the key phrase for us, and kind of the key barrier to innovation is often falling in love with the solution. There's lots of exciting new technology that's emerging all the time. This kind of wave of disruption has a huge amount of potential, but it's very easy to be technology-led and led by the solutions rather than being led by the problem that you're trying to solve. And with all of these cool solutions, it can be very easy to kind of fall in love with those. I say, that when you have a VR headset, it looks like the solution to all your problems is sticking on a VR headset. And I would say in 90% of the cases that is right, but in 10% of the cases it's good to look for those 10% where a VR headset is not the solution. That's a joke. That's not really the actual numbers, but VR headsets are great. So fall in love with the problem, not in love with the solution. I think it's really important. I mean, and to kind of your point around diversity. I mean, I think that is that's kind of one of the problems that I think is kind of coming up, because we in order to kind of adapt to this massive change that we are seeing. The real big change that we're needing is for organizations to learn to be adaptable. And I think what we're seeing now is that kind of diversity of thought and diversity of experience are no longer, people are starting to realize that these are no longer a nice to have. This is something that's necessary in order to give yourself the adaptability that's required, because people don't know what the future is going to look like, and so you need to have that kind of breadth of experience in order to address that. And I think it was great to see with the first Digital Disruptors event that was held in our Deloitte Digital Studio, which is just down the road. The winners were TestReach, who were which was a female-founded company. But I think this time it was harder to kind of get a diverse panel. But I think it's great to hear there is work being done, and I think what's clear is kind of there's more to be done on that score. So
just on that, I think, Ed, what I would really love then, just in the moment, in the spirit of cooperation, why don't we organise one championing that, a follow-up session, I think, and let's take that as a scorecard up. We've done a lot of work with women in tech. We do a lot of work here across the Fort campus on that. Yeah. So we'd be delighted to maybe do a follow-up session from this. I think your point is very well made. Yeah. And with Deloitte support too, and Enterprise Ireland support, I think we'd love to get involved in that too.
Definitely.
No, that would be brilliant.
We're definitely back in Ireland. We have a female entrepreneurship unit and looking to develop funding calls for more female entrepreneurship in tech, because it is an area that we're very passionate about, and that sounds like a great follow-up.
Yeah. And I think it is good as well to address because addressing it in more detail and looking, because as you mentioned it to me at the event, that was something that you wanted to do more of. But obviously it's not just about these kind of events. There's obviously big underlying structural issues that are hard to, that it's good to discuss. So I think the idea of that event is a brilliant one. So that'll be
brilliant. So and actually, in fairness, and just to follow on that, we do make a rule here too that we all don't do panels unless we have diversity on the panel.
Yeah.
So and it as people who organise panels, it can be a tricky one too.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Dr. Shan Loon, who we work with in our Tech Forum. She's one of the formidable speakers on regulatory technology, but she never got any work done because she'd be on panels the whole time.
Yeah.
So there is, but it's a point very, very well made. So back to your presentation, Ed.
So to move on, in terms of how we fall in love with the problem, not with the solution, if we go on to the next slide, the key thing is basically centering everything that we do around the user, making sure it's user-centric, and if you're centering everything around the user, then it's about kind of getting something for them that you can have and be able to test that as soon as possible. So that requires you to be iterative, and if you're being iterative, it then requires you to be collaborative and be working in kind of small multidisciplinary teams. And so when we to phrase that another way, because if we move on to the next slide, to phrase that another way, what we see there is that kind of start small, that ability to start small and test often, which I think organizations are getting better at, and that it was a barrier to innovation, was that inability to start small and test often. But I think that then the other kind of part of that is this idea of thinking big. And so we have this idea of the tangible hypothesis, which is basically an end-to-end user-level description of the kind of ideal experience that you are trying to create. And that's something that we find is a really kind of useful communication tool to kind of bring together all of the kind of different silos within the organization and things like that. Because that siloing, that lack of the think big is again another really, really big barrier. And then hopefully with all of those things in place, you can then scale fast. So that's kind of what we're doing with our clients. And that sort of shift, I think, is the really big shift that needs to be made away from kind of falling in love with the solution and towards kind of really addressing the problem, which is often less around kind of a tech implementation, and it's more around kind of a cultural shift or a mindset shift within the organization, often away from kind of a fixed mindset towards more of a growth mindset. But I think that is kind of the summary of what we're looking at and what the kind of the barriers that we are seeing and how we're trying to address those barriers.
Great, so thank you very much, Ed. So if we go to the next slide, we'll present the first question. And I want to pause here and I want to bring in Kevin, Shane, Padraic, Richard, Ed, on this barriers to innovation. So you've roll called several there, Ed, on your particular pieces, and it's great to hear from a buyer of technology. Let me open up to the other panel members on the sellers of technology, from your selling perspective in, and I'll pose this first question to Kevin. I'll then move to Shane on the phone, so Shane's prepared. But Kevin, these kind of barriers of selling in and barriers to adoption, what have you seen?
So I mean, the biggest barrier to innovation and adoption, I would say, is incumbents. I mean, anyone we're trying to sell to, there are incumbents selling their tech, and not only have they got tech, in a lot of cases, in enterprise, it's not very good tech. It's like a lot of the technology that is in enterprise is like 1990s tech, but they have huge operations managing the relationships and stuff like that, and that's a huge barrier. You don't only have to be innovative with your technology, but you have to also put together the operations that can challenge these huge incumbents. Like if your competitors are Oracle, they have a lot of, they know everybody on the board of your company, for example, and it's just difficult to compete with that. So you've got to, you have to find a guerrilla warfare, find the spots that are less protected to get in at the start. The second kind of big barrier to innovation worth mentioning is hype. Because as soon as, for example, with AI, as soon as AI starts, with the recent advances in deep learning, as soon as that gets out, lots of people who are just selling the hype emerge. And so it's hard to cut through the noise if you've got, genuine technical innovations. So those
two, I think, are brilliant. Actually, they're perfect segues when I was speaking to Shane about AI and the hype, Shane. But the barriers to adoption that you've seen are out there in selling mode?
Yeah, there's a few there, I suppose. I think it's difficult. It's difficult to foster an innovative culture in large organizations. So I do recognize that on the outside. On the outside, trying to sell into larger organizations, you can see that there's less risk appetite. There's people with their jobs on the line who are looking at a plucky startup or a plucky small company who may have some genuinely innovative technology, but they are putting a lot of trust if it's a mission critical piece of tech or it's a mission critical piece of software they're going to put into their entire operation. And it's very hard, I think, to keep that risk appetite high when your company gets larger, you have more customers, there's more people relying on you, and that the risk of something going wrong becomes maybe a little heavier, or there's a lot more red tape to get through. So often I've heard a good saying where you can choose having a big balance sheet or true innovation in your suppliers. And I can really see that in companies as they grow, that just there's a slowness to the innovation, there's a slowness to the development sometimes. Whereas I can see the pace at which we can shift and change and kind of react to market or new technologies coming out. So that's the biggest thing I've seen, really.
And so I'm going to turn the same question with a bit of a twist to Richard Crook here from Lab 577. Richard, first of all, regulation is a barrier to adoption, and a barrier to innovation. I think wearing your hat in terms of digital assets and the work you're doing there, and also the work that you did within RBS and R3 and Corda, and what barriers internally you had to break down for that innovation to really spark at its nascent days, Richard, and sharing that with our audience.
So I think from my perspective, I've been poacher and gamekeeper. I've been inside and outside, buy side, sell side. The innovations, barriers of innovation for selling to these large organizations, and I'll focus on the banks, which is where my comfort zone is, and fintech, if that's a word. London is a hotbed of new innovation, of VC money, and of fintech or innovation within the finance space. But when you go to sell your new product or service as a startup to the banks, it's a 2-year sales cycle, which if you're Oracle is perfectly reasonable. 2 years sounds like a good for the kind of deal you're trying to do. But you could quite quickly run out of cash as a startup in a 2-year sales cycle. But that is undoubtedly the first and foremost rule of thumb that everyone that is engaging to sell to a bank. I do it when I sell into my clients, and the banks are actually very reasonable and point out that however you want to cut the shortcut you've got, knowing someone on the board, great conversation with first person of this executive or this budget holder, it will take 2 years before you get paid your first invoice. Now that, if you set that sale up, you won't, if you set it up like that, you won't fail. You'll plan for the worst and hope for the best. The other side of that, not to be a doomsayer, is once in, even if they don't like you day one and they want to get rid of you, it'll be 10 years before they get rid of you. So there's a massive pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, right, which is 2 years to get in. It'll take you 10. As one of my bosses, very early on when I was over at UBS, said, we don't like this vendor. It'll take us 10 years to get rid of them. So pick wisely when you buy them. And so if you're on the buy side buying, you're also very cautious because you're stuck with them if you put them in your technology. Everyone knows that. So there's two sides to that. And I think if you take that forward, where the banks are well aware of that 2-year sales cycle, they're well aware of being cautious and conservative. The FCA has done a cracking job with the FCA sandbox of make it, however dubious or you might feel around what the FCA is up to with their FCA sandbox, they have struck gold by connecting the two and making sure that people see them to be doing innovation and at least bringing it to the fore of the agenda where it could just drop away. And the key thing to recognize there is inside each of those banks is a team who are trying to help fintechs get inside the bank. And actually what you want to be doing is finding those scouts, as they might be called in some banks, and those scouts are looking for fintechs and are looking for good fintechs to come in.
I just want to thank you very much, guys. I just want to close over with a closing comment from Ed before we move on to Kevin's presentation. So Ed, clearly Deloitte have put their money where their mouth is. They've got a disruptor. You've got a lab, you've got stuff. You're very energized and a huge champion of innovation. If anyone hasn't been to the labs, get an invitation off Ed. It is a fabulous experience. It's just wonderful. How are you measured internally? We're going to talk about success later, but you're breaking down these barriers to innovation. How are you making sure your colleague, as to Kevin saying, isn't buying from Oracle, but actually going to Edge Shop of Wonderful Digital Delight?
Yeah, I mean, all those problems that you highlight, I think, are exactly right and kind of very familiar. And I mean, I think that that 2-year, 10-year kind of cycle, that is the type of level of enterprise agility that will result in your company going bust. Before, I think in some cases it's happened slower than people were thinking, but like in the long term, in the face of all this disruption, it's definitely going to put you in a position of really high risk. Because I mean, 10 years, as you're saying, for those incumbents is way too long. And I mean, that's classic falling in love with the solution, because they're in love with it because it's so hard to get rid of it. So it's a weird sort of love, but it's a love all the same. And the hype again is classic falling in love with the solution. And so in terms of how my success is measured, I mean, a lot of it is about how we can change that kind of those cultures and those mindsets and shift them away from that, shorten that time period. So when we say tangible benefits as quickly as possible, what we're trying to do is say you shouldn't be having to wait 2 years. And if you are having to wait 2 years, you're then implementing something that was good 2 years ago, which is again is now just completely irrelevant. And so it's speeding that up, and definitely speeding that up for Deloitte as well is something that's key, because our sales cycles are also not as fast as I would like them to be.
We could do a whole session, I think, on just charting the procurement process, because the amount of firms we work with of even getting on the preferred vendor list. But okay, I think save and sort that. We'll be back to that topic in a minute. But Kevin, we'd like to move on to your presentation now, please. So welcome over to Kevin at Data Chemist.
Great, great to be here. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Data Chemist. To start with, we make enterprise knowledge graph software, and these are basically a new type of database that allows organizations to join together all of their data into a meaningful shape and keep structure on that data over time. And it allows people to query very large amounts of data and get useful answers out of it. Data typically that's joined together from multiple enterprise silos. Knowledge graph technology is very much at the forefront of technology at the moment. All the biggest organizations in the world are putting major efforts into building internal knowledge graphs just to join together all their data silos. Most large enterprises have thousands of internal databases. They're very poorly linked up. So knowledge graphs technology gives them the potential of joining the significant data together from all these different databases and turning, what is a lot of the time a data problem for organizations, just that they've got lots of messy data and they're afraid of breaches and stuff like that, making it so that their data is seen as an enabler rather than a problem. And the key thing to making that a reality is actually putting investment into figuring out how you're going to structure your data, making sure that your databases have quality controls, and that the data in your data is an accurate representation of the real world over time, because lots of databases get full of junk and stuff like that. And if you do put that investment in, like the biggest and the smartest companies in the world nowadays are all data driven. I'm talking about the Googles and the Amazons of the world. And, to be lots and lots of the biggest organizations in the world understand that in the next era, for them to continue to be successful, they are going to have to make data a strategic asset. And this requires innovation and investment, because it's certainly not the current case. Most databases currently support transactional applications. They're not designed to be analyzed for business intelligence. And companies spend an awful lot of time on hiring data scientists who often don't have access to good enough or meaningful enough data to actually do meaningful stuff. So really, I think the smart companies, the people who are going to do well in the next year, are the people who really invest in their core data infrastructure, into getting it structured and in shape. And this type of knowledge graph technology really enables that. We can join together like disparate data from lots of sources and then have meaningful queries at scale. And this is a problem that all enterprises face. Like most of our customers and our prospects are in very large institutions, because this is a problem everybody faces. They have these huge troves of data. They know there's value in it because it runs the systems, but they find it so difficult to extract new answers out of that data. And so, as I say, like a lot of the biggest organizations in the world, following Google and Facebook are the pioneers of knowledge graph technology, and now Uber and Airbnb and all the big internet giants and all the biggest banks in the world are following, because this is a perennial problem. And so what we are, in terms of our tech, and in terms of, we have a open source database platform which we're about to release. We also have a cloud platform that we offer on, but we are to popularize and familiarize developers, particularly with our tech, because our databases are very technology-centered products. Developers work with them. So we have a open source offering that we're about to produce. We also have a cloud platform that we provide services. And then over the top of that, what we do is we go into enterprises and we implement one of these knowledge graph systems, and then we apply machine learning and artificial intelligence over the top. And so, and as I say, our database gives us special, it's like a very modern architecture, a graph-based database, all in memory, lots of effort put into constraint management and stuff like that. And this gives us superpowers compared to existing legacy tech, which is very procedural and very based on people writing code. So we can typically reduce time and cost of data integration projects by at least a factor of 10 with this type of new tech.
Next slide. Well, we're up to it on the last question, right? Very good. I'm just making a note of your time and cost. That's fantastic, Kevin. You've opened up, the question of the year says, look, what's the key reason of success for the adoption of an offering or solution you've provided? And I think, Kevin, listening to your piece there, I'm really to open up to the everyone on scope was really how you did a benefits case. You know, when you're sitting in with a new technology that is improving and people are saying how to do the ROI. So I'd like to open up to the floor here, and I'm going to start with Shane first, and then I'll go to Ed and Richard, and I'll finish on you, Kevin. When you go in for the key reason of success for the technology solution that you're providing, Shane, and around the benefits case, I think, having broken down the barriers of innovation, we've now got meeting number 2, and we're presenting our benefits case. Shane, share with you if you could share with our audience some of your insights and your reasons that you've seen success around benefits case, please, Edgetier.
Yeah, it probably really comes down to as clear as possible of a proposition to show value, a value proposition as clear as possible to whoever you're selling to. So one thing that we found is that we can genuinely say to our clients when they have a large incumbent that's there, typically the systems that we see, they're quite poor, and people are used to that as the way of doing things, and they're kind of sucked into that short-term thinking of incremental improvements. And once we've gotten to that second meeting and they see a demo and they've seen it work, we can really show, look at how much smoother your customer service team can operate, look how much faster they can work, and look how high the quality will be. And then bringing them through that story and letting them see the art of the possible there, and then backing that up with existing client testimonials, existing client stories that show a true, here's the actual savings that can be achieved. And then making that real with the numbers that relate to their individual contact center. So actually turning and saying, you know, how many agents are in this contact center? What's the breakdown of contact channels? Okay, we reckon that X% of your cost will be reduced with this solution. And it's truly disruptive to the business model. It's not an incremental improvement in their performance. It's a step change for them, and it revolutionizes their kind of hiring plans going forward. And once they get that, once they see that, the sale becomes a lot smoother for them. You can immediately get it. You can see how you can get approval from, say, a CFO type figure after that, because the business case just stacks up. We'll spend X and we'll save 3-4X. So making that as simple as possible.
That's fantastic, Shane. Ed, I'm coming to you now. So this is Shane, just to recap. So it's meeting you, get the demo, show it working, show it's transformational, let them taste and feel it. You know, don't do it off just a PowerPoint. And even if it is X% saving, make it aspirational. If not quite tangible, make it aspirational.
Yeah, Ed, when you're tying it to euro value as well, you know, really getting to nuts and bolts.
Put a dollar value. So Ed, and you're on the receiving end of these pitches.
Yeah.
What's been your, you know, when you're an early adopter, no one got sacked for buying IBM. So when you sit down in front of your governance board,
I think exactly what Shane was saying there. I think the crucial thing is locating it in the context of the kind of the user journey, so how your users are going to be doing it, and showing it within the context rather than as a point solution, because I think that context and that story that Shane's talking about there, that's something you can take to the other departments in your business and say, this is a story, rather than, the solution itself is, and the impact of that. You can't necessarily take that to other departments because they'll be like, I don't know, I don't know how that fits in your department, let alone how that then will impact my department. But if you can tell them that story about that aspirational art of the possible, that kind of thing, then I think that's the crucial thing. And I think too often we see stuff kind of marketed as a magic bullet, and then the reality of it's not made clear actually how it's going to fit into the context of this organization. So it's like this is a magic bullet, it's going to solve all your problems, but then they don't describe actually what that's going to look like for the organization itself. And if they can do that, and then that can be used to get buy-in, because often the most disruptive innovation is one where it's not just a step change for a single department, it impacts across the whole organization. So yeah, I think Shane's exactly right.
And for Deloitte, Ed, is that the key piece when you're sitting down? Is this going to be transformational? Is what I'm looking at here to warrant the time, energy, focus? Is that the key filter? Does it have to have such a big bang?
Well, I guess we wouldn't advocate it as a big bang, because I don't think that's the right approach either. Because we do see sometimes people saying, oh, it's not going to be a big enough bang. Like, we recognise that it's going to be an incremental change, but you do, or like you're going to need to iterate, and like it's not going to kind of go in one go. But I think it's having that clear aspiration of where you're heading for, so that other departments who are looking for it can say, okay, I get this. This is the way that we're heading, and I can actually see how this will all fit together into a coherent, in Edgetier's case, a coherent customer service experience. I think that's the key thing. So it's not necessarily a big bang, but it's like, it is saying, is this taking us closer to the ideal customer experience? So rather than the actual bang on implementation, it's more what's the potential for bang in the
down the road.
Down the road. I think that's how we would view it, because I think there's a real danger. We hear some clients saying, oh yeah, this isn't a big enough opportunity for transformation. It's like, well, if it's going to deliver ROI, a positive ROI, just do it, because you'll learn a lot from that.
Sure.
And actually, your kind of vision for this perfect big bang thing that's going to come in, this magic bullet, which a lot of people are looking for, it's not there.
Yeah, it's learning through the active doing. It's play with a purpose, right?
Yeah,
so Richard, and then I'm going to be coming to you, Kevin, for final comments on this question. But Richard, from your perspective, what do you see as the key reason for early adoption of an offering or solution, from wearing either your buy and your sell side hats, Richard?
The straightforward success is finding a challenge and your product or service, your offering or solution meeting that challenge. So meeting a client's problem or challenge is what you're trying to achieve. We see a lot of, and we're all in danger of building a product and hoping the market will come.
Yep.
What we tended to call sort of the golden calf. If I build this, then they'll come. On the other way around, you go into the market and your product doesn't fit. You've got to make it fit both ways. So there are two dimensions to this. One is the market and what they're looking for, the challenge, and the other side is the solution, the product. And obviously, you go into a market and the client is looking for sort of moon on the stick, is the normal usual expression. The technologies we're using, the emerging technologies we're using, are just not there yet. Whoever's been in here and hyped this up, we're just not able to achieve that with quantum or AI or blockchain. So you do always have an expectation gap on the market side, but then you have to tailor that expectation and build a sizable hole to fit the product you're trying to place in, and the product has got to fit. So the square peg round hole thing is always a big problem here, where people are going into sales calls and they're talking too much and not listening enough. And you think the sales call is all about you projecting what your product can do, while if actually you spent 2/3 of the time listening to the client, and then the next call you go into actually reflecting what that last client said to your next one, you will iteratively learn. And that whole data-driven suggestion you're saying there is you watch the best salespeople are listening.
So I want to build on and prove that I'm listening. So I want to build on that. My question to Kevin actually. So reasons for success. We haven't come up yet. How do you price this stuff? So you've got an incumbent. You've got Oracle, or in your case, yes, not specifically the Chemist case. No. Disclaimer, etc., etc. So we have expensive incumbents and their price. But we know working with clients, actually pricing stuff and getting to the right price and having the confidence of pricing. Kevin, could you just touch on pricing and framing the product?
Yeah, I mean, well, with innovative products that do different things than established products, it's always very difficult because there's no direct competitor. And at the same time, you're trying to break into incumbents markets, so you have to have a very, you have to be cheaper or quicker or better or something, very distinctly so. So pricing is, it also very much depends on the value you're bringing to the customer and how much the customer cares about money. Like in the financial sector, people don't care very much about money. It's the people who are making purchasing decisions. Well, it's true, but they're doing it.
People wincing.
They're doing it with other people's money, and they care much more about security, about assurance, about all of is the package with it. Not raw over is it the best product, for example. So there's a lot of different factors in play. You can lose a deal in finance by charging too little easily. Because people just go, they sound cheap, and so pricing is always. I mean, we have not got this right yet. We charge either too little, or in fact we charge too little for the value we deliver. But you have to do that. You have to until you're established, okay, as a company that can provide ROI, and people hear about word of mouth from their peers, then people will believe the ROI you deliver. So you've got to use early customers to get, proof points of ROI on the board. That's really important. And then you can charge, the value of your products because because you're not a nobody anymore and you have proof points behind you. I mean, I think that's really critical. And then there's different markets. Like in terms of our product, okay, so selling to like CEOs, selling to the business side of the company, you have to sell an ROI. And the technology is it's just a prop. It's fancy stuff. Here's why we can do such an amazing job. But it's really ROI. They don't care about anything else. But we also, there's other types of sales. So we sell, a very technical product to data analyst teams, to data science teams. And that's a completely different sale. That's literally, they have a specific query in mind, and if they will get in and run it, and if you can do it fast, they want to buy the product. It's literally very driven by people having problems with data that they can't solve, or that it takes them 24 hours to run a batch job to solve, that we can do it really fast.
So it gets us to Ed's point about the story across your workflow. So just before I leave this piece here, this has been great. So get the demo, get it working. Yeah. Be transparent, not necessarily in numbers. You can be transparent across, have perspective across the workflow. Do some listening when you're selling and be agile in your pricing. Okay, super, very good. We're at the midway point of these presentations, and Shane, we're handing over to Shane at Edgetier now to take us through his presentation. And over to Shane. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. So Shane is my name. Thanks for the introduction. I'm CEO and co-founder of a company called Edgetier, based in Dublin. And at Edgetier, we're essentially focused on building AI-enabled software for the customer contact center industry. So we build systems right at the juncture between good software, really clever AI and kind of robotic process automation, and then human operators. And we try to get the best of all three of those worlds to really boost the efficiency of customer care. So it's a massive industry, the customer contact center industry. Like in the UK alone, there's over 6,000 customer contact centers. So 4% of the UK working population work in customer care centers. It's a massive differentiator for businesses. So having really good customer care is a differentiator for your customers. Bad customer care news spreads very quickly through the media or social channels. And good customer care is both a tool for customer acquisition as well as customer retention. From our perspective, this industry it's ripe for disruption. There's kind of a shift that's been happening over the last number of years, both in the quality of customer care and how people want to deliver it, as well as the methods by which customers contact care centers. So in the past, these would have been called call centers, where 99% of the contact would have been over the phone, and another 1% would have been written letters. Whereas now the mixes that we're seeing are closer to 30 or 40% phone, and then 50 or 60% across text-based channels such as email, chat, messaging, social. All of those types of communication methods are becoming infinitely more popular, especially with the younger generation. That move towards text has probably opened up the area of AI, and along with simultaneous that change, there's been dramatic increases, as we all know, in the availability and the capability of AI systems. So we've been working really hard to kind of use these systems and solutions and work really closely with our early customers to deliver solutions in this space. So we've been working really closely with some companies in Ireland to truly understand the problems that we're addressing. And we've seen the same issues come up in a number of contact centers. So that's how the products go about. So our first product here is called Arthur. So if we progress through that slide there for the 3 animations, Arthur is a system that sits beside customer care agents, and it essentially helps the care center agents process through queries as effectively as possible. So we really focus on allowing the human do the bits that the human is good at, and allowing the computer do the bits that the computer is good at. So we sit in the contact center and read every query as it arrives to the customer care center, so through email or chat. The AI system reads inbound messages from customers and determines what is this customer trying to achieve and who are they. And then we reach deeply integrated into our clients' internal databases or into the Excel sheet on Mary's computer, whatever's necessary, and we'll get all the information for that customer and pre-compose and pre-supply the agent. By the time the ticket reaches the agent screen, they will have a completely pre-written response following best practice as to what they should do next, what they should say to the customer, and we will have surfaced any pertinent information about that individual customer and their specifics of their query to the agent. So the agent's task becomes one of almost quality control. They're reading the inbound queries as they arrive, ensuring that they understand the customer's situation, and then they are kind of checking, is the system proposing the right response? Is this grammatically accurate? Is it following best practice? Is it truly addressing the customer's need? And really, if you think about it, good customer care and the best bits of really good customer care are the inherently human parts of it. So no one, when they contact a customer care center, no one values the fact that a care center agent can look up 3 windows and pull information from Salesforce and look up a database and copy and paste a template and then save the results. The stuff that really makes a difference for customers is the ability to show humor, negotiation, empathize with the customer situation, and make the care and the contact event as personal as possible. So the aim of our system is to kind of remove that other work and really emphasize the human aspect of the customer care center. So in terms of results, the system works. It works really well. So where we do this level of automation, we see a 5x increase in customer contact center kind of processing speed. So an agent using Arthur will process 5x as many queries. And then at the same time, if you tap on next there a few times, at the same time, those query responses, they'll follow best practice. So that reduces training time and it improves the quality from the customer's perspective. There's a lot less repetitive work for agents. So we get a lot of feedback from customer care agents who, they've worn out the Control-C and Control-V keys on their keyboard from the amount of copying and pasting they do between different windows and things like that. So all that work is taken away and they're really concentrated on let's help the customer, not let's copy and paste this. Like we've been in contact centers where at the end of every contact, the care center agent has copied and pasted the thing into 4 different systems because, inverted commas, that's the way they do things. And then at the same time, one thing the founding team of Edgetier really pride themselves on is a background in data science and machine learning. So we've really engineered the system to give a dedicated database instance for every client, that their data isn't mixed with other clients, and we can provide a really detailed layer of reporting on both what the customers are doing and what they're querying about, as well as all of the agent activities, queues, topics, and really surface with kind of advances in NLP technology, really surface to contact center administrators what is happening at the contact center level and what steps can you take next to actually reduce the contact. Because, you know, improving the efficiency is one side of it, but in a way that's improving things. But at the same time, the next step is what's driving the issues that are causing these customers to contact. So that's something we want to help with as well. Yeah, so that's Edgetier.
That's fantastic. Listen, having gone through over an hour on the telephone with Lloyd's Bank with a false flag stopping a payment to buy flights on my business card, Lloyd's have got to buy Edgetier solution. I don't know anyone's experienced that, but I went through 6 different tests. I went through the whole, I was absolute nightmare. I was driven to absolute distraction. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shane. And I'm sure we've all been there. We've all been in that situation. But again, to Kevin's point, it's got a little hypey stuff. It's got the AI and the machine learning and the data and all the good stuff in there. So I think I'm going to start, continue. I'm going to go to Ed, then Richard, then Kevin, then Shane, and that kind of loop will finish in Shane. Look, guys, and you know, as we head from 19 into 20, you know, what challenges might we face going forward? I want to talk a little bit. We're talking about the challenge of 4% of the UK workforce involved in customer care, according to Shane. But you know, what are the challenges we face, maybe, and opportunities, quickly to Ed, around adopting disruptive technologies? What are the risks if we don't? Maybe is another thing. And if you could touch on that, and then we'll go to Richard for the same question.
I mean, as I've said, I think the big risk with organisations not having kind of the agility to cope with disruption and you know, with new ways of working and having that ability to change, is that they will struggle and they will become irrelevant and they're going to go under. I think that's the kind of the primary issue. I mean, in terms of specific challenges as we head from 2019 into 2020, I think we thought that, you know, technology disruption was going to be the big thing, but the political system decided, wait, I don't want technology to do all the disrupting. Why don't we make politics really disruptive as well? So they have tried to get in on the Disruption Act, and I think that's a problem as well. Right? I mean, and I don't see it necessarily resolving. I mean, we have, we work with, I think all of our clients find that, you know, you've got the uncertainty of, you know, there's new technology coming, you need to be adjusting to adapting to this new technology, and also, and not just the technology itself, but also sometimes the unintended consequences of adopting it around, you know, data and stuff like that. And then at the same time, you've then got the political uncertainty, and, you know, as Richard was saying, and as you were saying as well, you know, regulation is really important. Yeah. Where the regulation is coming from is that disordered. It makes what was already challenging, the relationship between innovation and regulation, suddenly even more challenging. So I think that's going to be a huge.
I'm going to ask Richard and Nune's question, and I'm going to tee up a closing question of Kevin and Shane to talk about the challenges of resourcing and skills and hiring folk, which is it's a huge challenge. Yeah. But on this following to tee up, Richard, on that question on actual perception and adoption and change and manipulation. Good tech used a bad way. Maybe we can talk about it that way. But how are you finding your journey with the challenges you face with Libra and Facebook, say, or other things that are going on the world that might be influencing what your customers are thinking?
So I think more broadly, if we're looking at challenges we face going forward into 2020, it's a normal cycle of incumbents to disruptors, where the incumbents need to adapt before the disruptors gain traction, is the usual things. And you've watched, I have a 12-year-old son, and has no concept of Kodak or Nokia. Can't even recognize the brands. The disruptors everyone wants to be, and every CEO that's an incumbent wakes up every morning and just want to become the Blockbuster or the Kodak or the Nokia. Doesn't certainly want to be done on his watch.
Unless they're retiring And you can see sometimes they're weighing up, like, am I going to retire before I become the blockbuster? Like, do I have to do
the continuity boards within those listed companies are usually very much on that.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to be the Monzos, everybody wants to be the Apples. So the first and foremost thing to do is go and look at the response Apple made to Spotify coming into their market. It's only very recently that Apple was a disruptor, disrupting the music market, and they became the incumbent overnight with iTunes. And many don't even remember what it was like before iTunes. And Spotify turned up and showed us a new way. So they became the disruptor, and you watched Apple. And a disruptor responds to that disruption, and that is by far the best benchmark I have of how you should respond as an incumbent to a disruptor. So watch that. You can look it up on Google. Just go look at Apple, Spotify. Look at the graphs. See how Apple responded. That should be your case study of how you respond. You pointed out the regulator. Now the regulator acts as a double-edged sword in the finance space. Finance is a very different space, where it is the most regulated industry in the world for good reason. It was the most regulated industry before 2008, and suddenly, out of nowhere, on the regulator's watch, the finance industry blew up. We now have a series of regulators that are now being renamed for that reason. On their watch, it blew up. And in doing so, they've now turned around and started throwing a tsunami of new regulations. So what was an over-regulated industry has now got even larger regulation on top. So if you're a fintech coming into that space, attempting to try and be a regulated entity, it's a hell of a moat to cross. But once across that moat, it acts as a commercial moat to stop others coming into this space. You mentioned Facebook. Facebook has come into the finance space on a number of occasions. And the regulation that it finds and discovers to operate in that space is so onerous that they retreat every time. Libra is just one more attempt by Facebook to enter the finance space, and they have been hit over the head by a regulator who was caught in 2008 on their watch, and they are now much more up on disruption in their space, and they are much quicker to identify disruption to their stability and their regulation in their jurisdictions. So you've got a regulator who is much smarter than they were in 2008, and now you've got aggressive large entrants to the further market coming in. But as a fintech, if you're the one coming into this space, recognize it as a double-edged sword. It is a hell of a moat to cross, but if you work with the regulators and you get the forms filled in, once you're the other side of that moat, actually, it is a hell of a commercial moat to stop others coming after you.
I can see a team happening here after 2 years in the 10 years mode. I can see it. Which is I want to just thank you very much, Richard. A quick 60 seconds from Kevin and Shane on the challenges of talent, and then we'll get the final presentation with Richard, and then we'll wrap up on the webinar. So we're talking about challenges of 2019, 2020. You're in Dublin. I know, speaking with Shane, successfully recent fundraise too. The challenge of actually hiring people and getting talent. Where are you finding all these engineers?
So, Dublin has a big advantage actually, because it's like a global kind of boom tech town. So there's actually smart people from all over the world there. So, I mean, there's a huge amount of competition for the top 1% of talents. Computers and engineering is generally a game where you get disproportionate returns depending on how good you are. People talk about 10x engineers and stuff like that, but that's not really true. The smartest people are the people who everybody's after. The Google model of kidnapping all the smartest people in the world and making money somehow off them. But so it is a challenge. Like, the way around it is there's two things. One, have interesting, innovative tech and a culture that's very pro-developer. That's super important. The second thing is just where you're based. Like, there are a certain amount of pools in the world which kind of get winner takes all in the tech game. Obviously the Bay Area, but Dublin and London are similar. Amsterdam has got a little bit of that. Maybe Singapore. So there's I think it's actually really important to be in one of those global hubs, because we depend on talents from everywhere. Our workforce is from like 10 different countries, and Dublin is actually a really good base for this, because it has got that kind of global centerpiece of a lot of finance and technology companies being there. And as I say, that makes a huge difference. just to have, that diversity of talent. And the big risks, actually, to come back to an earlier point, is political barriers coming up. Like Ireland is a very open economy. It very much depends on these flows of technology and capital and people. And both across the Atlantic and here now, it looks like there's more borders going on.
I'm going to have to jump in before we mention the Brexit board again. I'm just very conscious, thank you very much, very conscious of time. And Shane, if I may come to you for any closing comments at the end of Richard's presentation, just on that topic, that'd be great. Because I would like to share Richard's presentation with everyone. We've had to chop and change. Get some Irishmen involved in a telephone call, see what happens, isn't it?
The Englishman's looking at his script, guys.
Yeah. How is the cricket going? Anyway, can we fire Richard's presentation and let's dig straight in. Richard, over to you. And Richard, if I apologize, we've spent 2 or 3 minutes on this, and we'll have a couple of minutes. I know Padraic's got some messages at the end. We'll take it from there.
So Richard Crook, I'm a former head of emerging tech for Royal Bank of Scotland. While we were there, we were taking a shrink wrap off quantum, AI and blockchain, all a series of emerging techs to see how that would help clients. We were putting together things like the Irish banks to build a distributed ledger for their clearing and settlement process. We jumped out as a team and started up Lab 577, a software company, co-authoring solutions for our financial clients using emerging tech, where we're the intersect between the finance domain knowledge and the emerging tech, and those two intersects are obviously driving quite a lot of disruption. That then takes you to one of the biggest disruptions we've currently got. If we flip to the next slide, you'll see the financial institutions are embracing what we call digital assets. Back in 2015, we separated Bitcoin from the underlying technology blockchain, and we took blockchain and we started to use it as a technology to tie and solve inter-institutional, inter-company challenges, inter-company business processes, where to a great less extent, we spent the last 20 years solving challenges inside the houses, where we wanted to get to single sources of truth, only have one place to do the calculation. We've done that, we've completed that cost cycle, and so we're now seeing blockchain being used in lots of enterprise spaces since 2015, and those projects are now live and going forward. And what you'll recognize when you go back into that space is it's pretty dry. Market infrastructure plays, they're looking at interbank reconciliations, not the kind of sexy thing people wanted to talk about, but it's moving forward and that is very effective, but it is affecting the bottom line. What we saw back in 2017 and 18 was the raising of capital to the order of $20 billion. To give you an idea, some of the crowdsourcing websites that have been market leading raised that sum of money over 9 years. But in 9 months, in a cross-border raising of capital, we came across and discovered the idea of being able to raise capital to the order of 20 billion. So in 9 months, they raised 20 billion. The same amount was raised for the last 9 years. To give you an idea, the UK's AIM market, the junior stock market, which is there to raise money for small companies, raised 4 billion in the year of 2018. To give you an idea of the scale of what's happened with that issuance of new capital. So the focus now is on the top line. The actual recognition that the bank's purpose is to create credit, issue capital, raise capital, and actually if you start disrupting that end of the financial cycle, it has a knock-on effect all the way through corporate, commercial, onwards into pensions, into asset managers and funds, and then onto retail banking and insurance at the other end. So when you see the news articles that are out there around digital assets, and the reason you see JP Morgan coin, or you see Facebook with Libra, or you see Fidelity attempting to bring it in. We have had 10 years of an experiment that we call Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, like Netscape, the first, but probably not the last, of these types of cryptocurrencies. And the cryptocurrencies are a very small part of the digital assets, where the tokenization of equity and debt, we have only just brushed the surface. And if we start disrupting the top line of these large banks, that is why you start seeing the news stories with large figure numbers and large amounts of impetus or momentum behind it. That gives you an idea of what we're working on right now, and more than happy to start the conversation. Do feel free to reach out to me.
Guys, I'm going to let this meeting run as well if you guys are happy with this, because we can later, and we've still got lots of people online and stuff too. I think it's really great. Fantastic, Richard. We talked about the regulations, innovation solutions in your industry, you have to comply. We talked about that, and maybe we've touched on that enough, I think, the regulation, and I think we've touched too on kind of perception and trust. If we go to the next slide, please. It's just me wrapping up, and then a question to each of the guys, and then over to Gareth or to Padraic. Perfect. Okay. So right, guys, we are now at final question time. What I'd like you to do, each of you, is to just share with you if there's one thing in 1 minute that you'd like to take the audience to take away today. What would be that one thing? And then we'll go to Padraic to wrap up some important news from Enterprise Ireland. So I'm going to start with Kevin. And then I'm going to go to you, Shane, and then you, Ed, and then you, Richard. And then Padraic at the end is going to give his one thing to take away today, and then Padraic's going to talk about the structure. So one thing, Kevin, 1 minute. What should you take away from today?
Well, the important point for me to get across is that the idea, which has long been a dream of organizations being able to combine all their data in meaningful and useful ways so that they can readily get insights out of it that help them to make decisions, is now a reality. Advances in both hardware and software in the knowledge graph space really make this a viable possibility for large organizations, and the benefit for doing so, and the benefit for starting earlier than your competition, is enormous.
There's no selling here, right?
So I would suggest anyone who wants to take that journey should have a conversation with me.
Excellent. So what's your knowledge graphs? Excellent. Shane, what's the one thing from today's discussion folks should take away?
No pressure. Do I sell? Yeah. I would say that actually, maybe broader than our own proposition, that the era of, I suppose, AI and automation disruption of workplace and workforce dynamics is going to be commonplace in the next 10 years. So from our perspective personally, I think like there won't be customer contact centers that don't have this type of software and this type of capabilities in 10 years time. That would be like having a shop that doesn't have a point of sale set up, or doesn't accept contactless payments. It just won't compete. And I think that's not only true of the customer contact center. I think that disruption it's starting in those types of areas, but will expand to all industries. And I would encourage any listeners to embrace that and get on board the train early, because I think there's massive advantages and massive gains to be had in the next couple of years as we explore it.
Excellent. Ed, same question. One thing.
Yeah, I think following on from Shane's thing, because I think 10 years, it might be even sooner than that. I mean, what we often say to clients is, look, with the problems that you're trying to solve, whatever experience you're trying to create for your customers or for your employees to enable that experience to happen, those you can deliver that now, or you can put in place the building blocks to deliver it in the next 10 years. If you take a kind of user-centered kind of problem focus, if you're listening, you can do that. And I think for people on the call, think in terms of that problem that you're solving and that experience that you're looking to deliver. And don't sell it as a magic bullet, but listen, as Richard said, understand the problem, and then describe for them, how you can then be part of enabling that ideal solution. I think that's the key thing. But it's a solution that's in context, that's solving the actual problem for the client that you're talking to, not a magic bullet that's going to solve a problem for everyone. So, I mean, I've said it. I say it 100 times a day, but fall in love with the problem, not in love with the solution.
Fantastic. Same question to Richard, and then Padraic going to be primed for you. And if you could be primed actually in this seat here, we'll get you close to the microphones, would be great. Richard, same question. What's the one thing from today's discussion you'd like our audience to take away?
I think the point that's been made here over and over again is that start with the problem and let the solution fall out, not the other way around. The listen, which allows you that feedback loop to improve what you're trying to do. And then last but not least, recognize that disruption is not a foe, but a friend. It is here, and if you can make it a friend rather than a foe, you have successfully survived what is going to be an ongoing acceleration for the next 5-10 years.
Brilliant. Disrupt and survive. I love it. Brilliant. So, Padraic, could you maybe introduce yourself, explain your role at Enterprise Ireland, and then explain with our listeners a little bit about the digital disruption events and initiatives at Enterprise Ireland?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Mike. First of all, I do think that the main thing, as well, learning point for me is the absolute, when you gather people in a room like this, both physically and virtually, you actually cut through that buzzword bingo and that noise, and you get some really great discussions. So I'm definitely looking forward to working on more on webinars, which you might. So it's a really fantastic discussions. So for those of you that don't know, I'm from Enterprise Ireland, which is a trade and development agency and VC arm of the Irish government. We're actually one of the second most active fintech investors in the world and third most largest seed investor in Europe. And a vast majority of those seed investments are technology companies. So we have a really vast range of technology companies and a really interesting portfolio. I'm based here in our London office, and we help those digital companies expand here in the UK and help them scale. And we do that through a number of ways. We do it through in-market advice. We do it through events like the wonderful Digital Disruption event that we hosted at Ed's fantastic lab in Clerkenwell. And it's an event just really to showcase Irish companies' capability and showcase what we're offering and what we're doing in the UK marketplace. We also do things like a mentoring program, which our closing ceremony is happening later on tonight that Mike has been a part of, again, just to showcase opportunities and allow our companies to scale. And then we also look to do key introductions to buyers as well. So again, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to learn more about any of the companies here, or is any of the audience that wants to learn more about the types of Irish companies we have, again, we have two fantastic companies here in Edgetier and Chemist, but we have a huge portfolio. So I'd encourage anybody listening to get in touch with me via LinkedIn, and we'll grab a coffee, or if you're based in London, there might be an ice cream in this weather. But please do reach out. We've colleagues working in fintech, talent management, technologies, digitech. So anything you want to learn about more, please reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Brilliant, Padraic. Thank you very much. Well, it just leaves me to say, look, thank you very much, Ed, Shane, Kevin, Richard, and especially as Padraic. It's been a really great session, actually. So I think we all agree digital disruption is a fascinating place. It's the survival, I think, and transformation are key ones in today. And I also think love the problem, not the solution. I think that's the key word. Okay, so to find out more about the array of innovative talent on the panel today, you can keep up to date with our social channels on screen now. But don't worry, this session has been recorded, so you can listen again to any of the points made this afternoon. The recording will be published shortly on digital TV and YouTube. And you can keep an eye for an upcoming published article. I think we're doing an industry article in this session too, and publish that out too. If you want to get in discussion, you look on screen, get in touch, or you can drop us an email. We'd love to have a chat with you. But listen, really, thanks everyone for giving up their time, for coming in and sharing your insights, and for everyone dialing in. I think it's been really great. Just thank you very much indeed. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much, guys.